this gets so many remarks and smiles. It's crazy. It's a proper act of defiance, apparently. Uh, but I think if you take the English thing reminds me of the other issue that I talk about, which is like, who is a woman? What is a woman? And I think if you take away someone's uh, belonging, then they have nothing to defend. And I think that's what's happened. That English, you're allowed to be Scottish, you're allowed to be Welsh, you're allowed to be Irish. Northern Ireland obviously is another issue, but not English, not so much. And I guess I probably don't have the answers as to why, but I do know that is how it feels.
And that makes you feel prouder to state it.
Yeah, pride is a funny thing, isn't it? Like, what are you really proud of? That you were born somewhere and that your ethnicity is something that's a bizarre thing to be proud of. But I think the fact that we're not allowed to be proud of it makes me think, well, let's have some questions about that, shall we?
And you're right, I think it is weird to be proud of something completely out of your control. But on the other hand, ethnic minorities are often encouraged to be proud of those things. And gay people are encouraged to be proud of being gay. And yet we're told constantly you can't have affected that. It's innate or out of your control. So why shouldn't you be proud of your English ethnicity, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I still can't get to the point where if I link Englishness to ethnicity, which if it's not ethnicity, what is it? But though all those words in a sentence together, I couldn't possibly say I am proud to be ethnically English, because that just feels very wrong. I don't know if I can articulate why, but that just feels an odd thing that I would say. But if someone said I'm proud to be Indian, my parents are Indian, I wouldn't say, well, what a ridiculous, what a crazy thing to say.
If I told you I was proud to be ethnically Jewish,
Yeah, no, what? I mean, I don't think anyone would think that that was an odd thing to say at all. But ethnically English is weird, isn't it?
yeah, it's really interesting. And you said it's turned into an act of defiance to wear clothes like that and to wave the flag. And it has recently. This whole movement of flag waving here in the UK has become really controversial. The thing I think is interesting is I saw all these stories on the news. I was watching one on Sky News recently, and they were talking about, they did a whole very po-faced, serious report on these people putting up British flags in Britain. And fair enough, there is a story to it, who's behind it. I never saw them do that over the last 2 years about the thousands of Palestinian flags that I saw go up around Britain. They didn't once run a story about how interesting it was or who was behind it,
Yeah.
or who gave them the flags. Why do you think that is, that the British flag in Britain is more controversial than the flag of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization?
I think ultimately it comes down to genuine middle class racism. And let me qualify that. Brown people, like for posh middle class dinner set people, brown people can't be expected to behave the same as us, because ultimately they're not the same. Now, the reason I say that is because they're forgiven really terrible bad behavior. They forgive it on the basis that those people aren't white, that they wouldn't do if they were white. And it comes down to class. It's like, white people badly behave, well, they must be scummy. But if brown people do it, it's not seen as the same. And I can only say that that comes down to the sort of the lens of racism, because I have expectations of a person, no matter what they look like, where they come from. I expect them to behave in a certain way. And if I don't, and the difference between behaving and not behaving and what my expectations is the color of their skin, then surely I'm a racist.
I agree with that. I wonder if you can make an exception, though, for a generalized idea. It's just a thought experiment. Maybe what they're saying is that a lot of people from a culturally different background might have different behaviors. And so when we look at some of the controversies in this country that have centered over race, things like the so-called Asian grooming gangs, which I find a really weird euphemism, sounds like a Korean hairdresser's. They are trying to suggest on the so-called right that it is a cultural difference and that it is predominantly Pakistani Muslim men who are carrying out those crimes. Not that all Pakistani Muslim men do, but the majority of those who are doing that were. And maybe you're saying that on the left, they have a similar attitude and saying, well, brown people aren't expected to behave the same. Is there a bit of crossover? That's what I'm trying to get. I haven't expressed it brilliantly.
Well, I think on the right, saying that, I mean, I don't know, should we divide on those? People that say it is a cultural thing are right, it is. And I think that you have the men that did it, and you have the families that know that the men were doing it, and you have the communities that know the families of the men that were doing it. I think it was known. Um, on an anecdotal level, I talked to a man in Speaker's Corner quite recently who started talking about mothers are to blame for children not wearing enough clothes because men will look at those children and have paedophilic thoughts.
Only perverts.
Yeah, well, he was saying that there's so many of those perverts around that if you don't dress your child appropriately, I don't even know what he was meaning appropriately, but if you don't cover your children up, then you're basically inviting paedophiles to have fantasies about your children. Now, I think that thinking comes from a conversation where they say about the English girls, the 12-year-olds, because we extended it to sort of 12 and 13-year-old victims of Pakistani Muslim paedophile rape gangs. And I think that they've been told that it's the girls' fault and the mother's fault of those girls who weren't looking after them, and their men aren't with those girls, and what did anyone expect? So I think that's what I think of people on the right, that they are right to say that it's a cultural difference. And as of people on the left, I think it's also right that they think it's a cultural difference and those people can't be expected to behave. And we don't want to mark those. We don't want to mark every Pakistani because all men do it. So they dilute it that way. So they use their own little tactics. And I don't think the people on the right are wrong, but they both see that culture as different because it is.
So maybe the distinction here is back to your 96% English DNA. It's not about their DNA and it's not about their brown skin, but it's not inaccurate, you're saying, to say that it is a cultural difference because of their background and family and where they come from in the world that has perhaps given them different values that encourage them to justify a behavior that here in this country is criminal, illegal, abusive, etc. So it's not about the 98% or 96% or the DNA or the color of the skin,
No.
but there might be some correlation.
I think the left see things through a lens of race. And obviously some people on the right see things through the lens of race. And racist people definitely see things through the lens of race. And then they're the rest of us that don't see things through the lens of race. And I would say that we were in a place in this country predominantly where we didn't do that, but people on the left did, and I don't know that we knew that. And they've had the narrative of, you know, even Asian grooming gangs. It wasn't Asian grooming gangs. Who gave them that term? It wasn't me. It wasn't you.
Your point is that it's not that they're Asian that is the issue here.
It's not a load of Chinese men, is it? You know,
South Asia. But the point, I suppose, is either way. Anyway, it's not the fact that they're Asian.
No.
It is the cultural thing that you think has given them that framework.
I think cousin marriage comes from misogyny. You know, the fact I did something about Free Your Face, which was to do with the niqab, and I got letters from so many incredibly intelligent, articulate. I mean, I wonder if Arabic lends itself to a particular way of speaking that's just quite poetic. But these women wrote to me about their lives behind the niqab, never feeling the sun on their face, and that they have to ask, in order to get married in Saudi Arabia, they have to ask their cousin if they're allowed to marry this other person, and if not, they've got to marry their cousin.
You know, I spoke with Yasmin Mohammed about this, and she's worn the niqab, and I asked her because I saw someone in the local Sainsbury's dressed full niqab. In fact, I couldn't see it. There wasn't even a slit, nothing. And I said it terrified me to see it. But what terrifies me more is that nobody else in Sainsbury's batted an eyelid. And she said, well, imagine what it's like inside there. She said, children run away from you and scream because it's instinctive. And she said, and then you smile at them to make them feel better and they can't see.
No.
So she said it's the assumption that there's something wrong with criticizing it that is the problem.
Yeah. Well, I know. So the way it went is I was at Speaker's Corner. I saw two young women, pretty sure they were young, wearing it. And I just said, on camera. I didn't know I was on camera, but the lady that had the camera, she was just brilliant. And I just said, free your faces, ladies, liberate yourselves, free your faces. And I think it was viewed about 25 million times on Twitter.